The girl was worried that now Kvan would definitely get angry and understand that he still should not marry her, and the ghost's malicious voice of the Eusphere, from a past life, began to be mockingly whipping that she finally ruined everything. Is it really so difficult to please the Emperor? Because you can't even use magic anymore. The ghost did not calm down. What a reckless you are, Eusphere. Then the princess gathered with strength and said, I will take responsibility, Kvan, whatever you decide. He was surprised. What responsibility? Because nothing actually happened. And to the words of the girl about the spoiled shirt, Kvan, unexpectedly, in one confident movement, took off this item of clothes. Then he said with satisfaction, You see, now everything is in order. There is no guilt in what happened. The princess and the dirty clothes can be removed, and the problem will disappear. Yusfer said uncertainly to her husband, But because of me, your mood has deteriorated. And Kvan, fastening the buttons of a fresh shirt, was again surprised. Why did you get it? He said that he was angry with a person who became a victim of marine illness, the top of stupidity, so he was completely calm. Just in case, the man checked whether the girl had no temperature, put the backside of the palm to her forehead. Kvan, on the contrary, admitted that it was his fault when he forgot that the Eusphere on the ship was for the first time. The incident was rather the result of his indiscretion, so the man suggested simply forgetting about it. To relax his wife a little, he decided to tell the story of how he went next to the battlefield in his youth. Then Kvanah was pursued by one Gifor guy who wanted to join the revolution. This guy spoke ardent speeches that he would follow Kvanah until the end of his life and was ready to even die for him. But while they walked past the field and talked, this guy came across a head body, and then, unable to restrain himself, since such a nightmare spectacle was a novelty for him, the guy was sick right on Kvanah. Having made an intriguing pause, the Emperor asked the girl can imagine who the guy was. It turned out that the second hero of this story was none other than Aslan. He found all this insanely nasty. This did not fit in the head of the Eusphere with the image of the Emperor's assistant, that she thought that she misunderstood everything. But the brunette confirmed that they think about the same donkey, his right hand. A little grudgingly, recalling this situation from the past, Kvanah said that Aslan did not even apologize properly. On the contrary, a guy with green hair said that it was Kvanah who should apologize for showing him this horror. The girl grinned briefly, covering her mouth with her hand. This story really drove off her experiences. She, smiling brightly, said that she would never have thought that the Baron also has such a side. The man's heart missed a blow when he saw his wife sincerely smiled at him. He considered her charming. Taking himself in his hands, Kvanah said that, be that as it may, a lot of time passed, and Aslan does not even remember this. Therefore, he was sure that Eusphere would forget about this awkward situation only after a couple of floating. These were trifles. The Empress was struck that the husband was so sweet and restrained, and considered what happened only to little things. She was sincerely surprised that, comparing the situations, for Kvanah, that marine illness, that a severed head, were trifles. It was scary to imagine what the guy's life was, since such a cruel spectacle seemed to him a trifle. Now, traveling with him, Eusphere was glad that Kvanah could recognize the present, and not his image of a tyrant and despot. In the deck, towards the cabin of the marital couple of rulers, the young guy fled, clearly in a hurry. He slowed down and stopped only just before the entrance. With a trembling hand, he knocked on the door. Kvan, just by knocking on the door, guessed who was from the guest. Obviously, he was waiting for the appearance of a subject. Eusphere, unlike him, did not suspect that someone could help for them now. The Emperor cursed that the subject was going to come to them for so long, but the Uiafir stood up, saying that he could sleep. Kvanah allowed the guy to enter, and he, a little shy and uncertainly, looked inside, apologizing for being late. The brunette ordered to stop making excuses and inspect the Empress. For red-haired, it was an honor to get acquainted with the Eusphere. The girl was struck by the fact that, to inspect her, it was reacted to this guy who was even younger than her. The main doctor of the imperial palace was Simon, a red-haired young man with glasses with a round frame. He looked at a pair of rulers in confusion, preparing to start inspection. He was still a child, but, despite the little age, the boy deserved his position. He turned to the Empress. Only this appeal was able to derive the fair. Hared out of her thoughts, she did not notice how she looked at Simon. The girl introduced herself to him and smiled, saying that she was very pleased to meet him. She also thanked him for coming so early. The guy assured that this did not cause inconvenience. Kvanah, but he has a hobby, wound up, and irritably rushed a slow doctor. Yusfir asked her husband not to put pressure on the boy so much, because she was in order. Kvanah was a little resting. Simon knelt down in front of the Empress, examining her, still in tension due to the behavior of the ruler. The blonde, with a little sad, noticed that the poor young man was already shaking with fear of the emperor. To dilute the stop a little, and to quench interest, the Empress asked Simon how old he was. The guy replied that year he was performed 18. Yusfir noted that he was the same age as her younger brother. She said that since Simon is so young and already works in the palace, then he must be a real genius. He did not agree. Yusfir stood her own. The emperor would not appoint an ignorant person for such a responsible position. She turned to her husband and wanted him to confirm her words. Kvanah agreed with the blonde. Despite the appearance, Simon had a good memory and great ingenuity. The man added that, let the red and young, he could come in handy, so the emperor took him into the palace. Yusfir drew the guy's attention to the fact that even the emperor says that he was capable, so Simon may not be nervous. The words of the emperor and empress very inspired the doctor, and he thanked them for their support. Simon told the ruler that so far he is not good enough, but from now on he would try his best. He took the girl's hand and, inspired by the faith in him of the imperial family, said that they could call him at any time. In response to his determination, Simon received sincere gratitude. Kvanah looked at them with an unread look. He averted his eyes, obviously displeased with something, but was not angry, but rather was in a slight confusion. When the doctor left, Kvanah voiced that Simon was not the most talkative person, but he seemed to like the Yusfir. She said that it was excellent, and noticing his confusion, explained that the empress should be close to the people. The emperor, noticeably jealous, sarcastically asked whether they also held their hands with Simon by the hands to get closer. The sudden discontent of her husband surprised her, because she did not even think that this action would be regarded incorrectly. Yusfir apologized for not thinking, forced the brunette to feel uncomfortable. The man assured that everything was in order, and he said this was not to apologize. Yusfir recalled that Simon was almost the same age as her younger brother, so she just felt sorry for the doctor. Therefore, the fact that they held hands was an act of support, as the fact that Kvanah was then hugged her in a carriage. Then she realized that the warmth of someone else's body could help to calmly calm down and recover. That is why, noticing Simon's excitement, she wanted to share this with him, but she promised that he would continue to be careful. Kvanah was extremely delighted with how generous and Mila was his chosen one, but did not tell her about it. He handed the Yusfir a small red berry, encouraging the girl to open her mouth and let him eat. The empress asked why this. The brunette explained that he thought that the medicine that Simon gave her was bitter and wanted to kill an unpleasant taste. The girl realized that it was dried raspberries and joyfully said that she was her favorite berry. Kvanah, pleased that he had pleased the blonde, handed her a glass of raspberries and offered to eat in this case yet. The delighted Yusfir clarified in a man whether she could eat her all, and he replied that they had a lot of raspberries. He leaned closer, and with a smile noticed that the fair-haired seemed to be not a rabbit, but eat so little. They met their eyes, and for a few moments lingered in this position, looking at each other's eyes. Then Kvanah got up from the couch and said that soon the Yusfir would become easier. Therefore, as soon as she went to bed, it was too late. The wife asked him if he was also going to bed, but the emperor replied that he still needed to work. Whether he would go to her question again, he replied that he would not leave her sick and alone. He has the necessary documents with him. Light because of the lunar rays, the sky was reflected in the sea surface. Kvanah promised to look after the girl while she was sleeping. After that, he lit a candle and settled down at a low wooden table in their cabin, laying the documents on the countertop. The fair-haired man lay down in bed, but the dream still did not come to her. She looked at her working husband. She was very pleased to realize that he remained in the room for her, only so that she could relax calmly. Even if Yusfir behaved in disagreement, Kvan still was not angry with her. On the contrary, he was worried and worried. Yusfir wondered if the reason was that the emperor would like their relationship to become real. She even allowed the possibility that if she retains the marriage and prevents the war, they could try. But positive thoughts suddenly broke off as soon as the figure of her evil brother, calling her name, would appear in them. A relative's voice sounded in my head, ridiculating her hopes for a good future and grandiose plans. Fingers involuntarily squeezed the sheet due to the nerves. She remembered that if suddenly she became useless, then she would be thrown away. So far, Kvan could have been a sweet one with her, but as soon as it turns out that she is barren, her past life will remind of herself. She tried to calm the trembling in everything, and, clinging my eyes, pull herself together and calm down. Yusfir admitted that she had lost his vigilance. If the emperor learned about her weakness, the girl would have had a bad one. As if trying to steal from her own obsessive thoughts, the blonde hid a blanket with her head and tried to fall asleep. Kovan noticed this, distracting from his lesson. He squinted at the girl to make sure that everything was in order. She did not move anymore, but the man continued to drill her with an attentive look from the other end of the room. The rest of the night passed relatively calmly, and after a while, the ship met a pleasant, sunny morning. When it dawned, the Empress woke up, taking a sitting position on the bed and rubbing his eyes. The first thing she did was looked around. She noted in confusion that her wife was not in the cabin. Soon, the arbitrariness of the ruler was noticed by the maid. She was worried about whether Her Majesty was in order after the night. Yusfir smiled radiantly to the woman and replied that she was in order, and the rest definitely benefited her. In addition, the Empress did not want to spend all the time on the ship in the room, so she was heading to the deck. As soon as she went upstairs, she felt a refreshing breeze that she disheveled her light curls. The enthusiastic look of emerald eyes appeared an amazing view of the open sea. She had never seen this before. Yusfir could not break away and studied each element of the landscape that opened on the horizon. Here is what the sea it is. At that moment, the guards of the ship approached her, greeting Her Majesty in chorus. She greeted them in response. As expected, the Imperials treated her a little wary. She felt it yesterday when meeting with Aslan. If you think about it, it was logical. Indeed, for them, the Eosphere is nothing more than just an unknown stranger. The Empire of Radon, at the head of which Kvan, was founded relatively recently. The empire was progressive, but still not stable enough due to its recent education. Instead of introducing a sorceress into the clan, the emperor should marry an aristocrat from his country. Such a decision would help strengthen the power of Kvanah, but for some reason, he decided to act differently. The whole empire wondered who their ruler chooses, and then the Yusfir appeared, the princess of the little northern country. This choice of the empress was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Therefore, their attitude is quite understandable and explainable. In Ahay, the blonde saved her status of the keeper, thanks to which she got the respect of the subjects, but not in Radon. From thoughtful, the girl brought out a sudden and loud scream. Someone began to call her and obviously approach. The excited Simon ran out of the cabin, who hastily said that he was looking for her. Yusfir told him that yesterday's medicine helped her a lot. The doctor was worried that she could catch a cold from behind the wind. Suddenly, behind the red-haired Kvan, who said menacingly that he should not reach a cold, he came closer to his wife and said that since she was not in the room, he decided to look for her on the ship. Kvan, without much effort, picked up a fair-haired man in his arms and invited her to return to the bedroom. She did not have time to object. The emperor and the chosen one retired, despite the requests of Yusfir to let her go. Only then did Simon exhale in relief. The empress was indignant that her husband was again carrying her in her arms in her eyes, and he asked that she was bothering her in this. He suggested that this was due to non-compliance with etiquette, but Yusfir said that she was simply worried about his reputation. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of their cabin and said that he had forgotten something. The man approached his wife's face and mysteriously continued his thought, thinking that she should have told her about this before. He admitted that he became an emperor in order to be able to act as he wanted, without fear of reputation. He did not like that people had to drive themselves into the framework of etiquette and obey the authorities, so he carried out reforms. The brunette carefully put the girl on the bed. He assured her that the people who looked down on him had long left, and the remaining people respected their emperor too much to condemn him for anything. While they were talking, Yusfir accidentally noticed a couple of unusual books next to her on the bed. The girl took one of them in her hands and examined the cover, asking what kind of book it was. She did not blame her before. The man said that he thought that she would just sit in the room, would be bored, so he brought several books while she was sleeping. The journey was a long time, so before sailing, he took some books from the palace library in advance. Kvanah carefully asked whether the empress chose the books he'd chosen or not. She vanishingly assured that she likes. Yusfir was delighted, because she loved to read very much, but recently she had no free time for this. The empress suggested that her wife read together, and he could not refuse her in any way. She read one book and thought that in a even her passage was difficult to find, not like such a good copy. Yusfir heard that the imperial library is the largest on the continent. Apparently, Kvanah also liked to read. The better she recognized her husband, the more surprised at what the man really was. She thought that he would not be too interesting for reading, because he literally grew up on the battlefield. But it turned out that no. She laughed softly. She was amused by how serious Kvanah looked when so focused. Reading was the only enthusiasm for Usfir, even in a past life. She spent most of her time alone. Then the book successfully helped her cope with this feeling. Thanks to the invented worlds, she forgot about her problems, but now an amazing feeling overtook her, to share with someone what is expensive for her. It was unusual, but nice. Thinking about how great it would be to live so peacefully in an empire with Kvanah, the girl imperceptibly fell into a dream. After a while, the emperor woke her cautiously, calling in a whisper and shaking his shoulder. After a sudden daytime sleep, the girl tried to understand what happened and why her husband suddenly woke her up. The man told her that they had arrived, and the girl's sleep was like a hand. She could not believe it. Their ship finally stopped at the port. It was time to go to the imperial palace. The carriage in which the emperor and the empress were calmly moving along the streets of the city, heading to the palace. Yusfir asked Kvanah whether everything would be fine. He did not even greet his subjects to return. The girl said that since he returned with the marriage union, in the case of Ahe, the people would have been waiting for her with trepidation and impatience. He replied that a few days later, he would speak with a welcoming speech, and the Yusfir will simply be nearby. And then he would like to officially introduce Usfir after a grand wedding that they will arrange here. He asked if he understands correctly that the marriage in Ahe was simply a formality for them. Kovan down the line, saying that his people to get to know the empress after their wedding. Then subjects could see the Yusfir in all its glory. Meanwhile, they arrived at the destination. The imperial palace was really huge and incredibly beautiful. The subjects joyfully greeted them with respect. While Kvanah was excommunicated, the main maid, named Marianne, introduced herself to the empress, like other maids. Mariana said that she would do everything in her power, even if she is not good enough for Usfir. The empress was embarrassed. Other maids left, and Mariana invited the ruler to follow her. The maid wanted to show her the palace. Following the maid and examining the palace from the inside, the Yusfir noticed that the Radon Empire developed surprisingly quickly. It is a pity that it is easier for people to call Kvanah a barbarian than to recognize his merits as a ruler, that he has achieved such progress. While they passed one of the long corridors of the palace, the blonde noticed one unusual structure in the window. Marianne explained that this building was built recently, so it looks so beautiful. The maid asked Her Majesty to visit him. Yusfir politely abandoned the offer. Nevertheless, it looked exactly like the palace in which she lived in Ahe. This was madly surprising. The girl carefully examined him, but they did not linger for a long time near the window and went further along the corridor. The maid proposed to hold the empress into the main palace. The second floor was intended for future heirs, but the next room, in which Mariana brought the fair-haired, was the chambers of the empress. The woman sincerely hoped that the ruler would like her new house, and the room could not help but like. It was equipped with luxurious furniture and, in general, incredibly sophisticated. Mariana suggested that the empress would get tired after a long road, so she ordered to prepare a bath in advance. The maid said that she would remind the maids to pay special attention to the preparation of the chambers, while the Yusfir was looking at the bed. The empress turned to a woman and asked what kind of preparation is required. It seemed to her that everything was ready. She was asked whether this will be the first joint night of the emperor and the empress in the palace. It was so the maids were especially tried on cleaning, which Kvanah also noticed, returning to the room in the evening. Even the atmosphere in the chambers has become different. Yusfir told her wife that they all equipped Goraniki. Kvanah also remembered that this was their first joint night in the palace and asked if the girl was so dressed. A fair-haired man, with worriedly, uncomfortably, shrugged, according to the reaction of the emperor, thinking that this dress did not go. The man took an embarrassed look and said that on the contrary, it was very going on, and that was the problem. He recalled that he himself said that there would be nothing between them, until the Yusfir herself wants it. That is why every time it was difficult for him to restrain himself so as not to cross the empress's personal boundaries. Kvanah, heading for the bed, said that they were tired, so he believed that the best decision was to go to bed rather. Suddenly, Yusfir decided to apologize that sometimes it could seem stupid because romantic relations were new to her. The emperor admitted that he is not very different from her. Yusfir was also the first with him, which very surprised her. The man asked if he was surprising that he had no experience in relations with girls, or perhaps the former princess of Ahe simply preferred more experienced men. The fair-haired woman was driven into a dead end and froze, not finding suitable words to answer these questions. The brunette said that they could agree on everything else, but apparently the lack of experience was an incorrigible problem. After assurances that this is not a problem, Kvanah said that, it turns out, they both did not know how the wedding night should go. He offered to practice, embarrassing his wife with such a wording. And for starters, he just took her hand. The man did not try to rush events, and sensitively said that if the US fear was ready, they could lie together on the bed. The fair-haired woman was a little bewildered because of this behavior of the emperor, and thought about how it was worth doing. She eventually hinted that she was not against lying together, but for this, she needed to change into a more convenient dress. The girl hurried to the exit and informed that she would move into the next room to change the outfit. Kvanah stopped her, reminding her that behind the butt of the buttons on the dress, and she herself would not be able to unfasten them. Trying to inadvertently not to look at the girl, the man shyly asked if he could help her with buttons. Yusfir agreed, and they sat together on the edge of the bed, both feeling a small lump of excitement in the chest. Carefully tinging the buttons with his fingers, the young emperor unbuttoned them one after another, weakening the dress. The dark fabric fell a little on the girl's shoulders, exposing a pale back. Brunette informed that he had finished. The empress embarrassedly thanked her husband, feeling his cheeks more and more noticeably flooded with scarlet paint. Kvanah, slightly bewildered because of his indecision, replied that there was nothing to thank him for. After some time, Yusfir returned to the room in a new dress, and they both went into the same bed, preparing for bed. The girl felt a little awkward because of the dress. Usually she was helped with this maid, and here, Kvanah. She was lying to her husband with her back, but when she heard his question about the training, she immediately turned to face him. The brunette calmly held out her palm and said that if she was lying so far, he could not hold her hand. The girl forgot a little about the planned training, but now she lay down a little closer, uncertainly raising one hand. She took his palm in her, and the man carefully squeezed her brush with her fingers, feeling pleasant warmth. Yusfir asked her wife, "Unless he was Nilovko. They are in the same bed. Everything happened so suddenly." The girl also said that on the ship they slept in different rooms, but Kvanah said that she was wrong. It turns out that they slept in the same room, just a girl in bed, and he is in a chair next to her so as not to embarrass. In another room, he left only to change clothes or take a bath. The empress did not understand what such sacrifices were for. The man depressedly remembered how his chosen one dreamed of some nightmares with the participation of her older brother. Kvanah carefully looked after her, straightened her hair, and tried to calm through his dream, and it seems it turned out. The emperor briefly retold those nights when she dreamed of bad dreams and what happened later. Brunette explained his concern and victims by promising that he would be nearby until the girl could sleep calmly. She thoughtfully replied to him that Kvanah was really not at all the same as she imagined him from stories. To be honest, before the wedding, Yusfir was even a little afraid of her fiancé. She was scared by his strength in battles and cruelty. She believed the rumors in which the Kvanah was exposed with a tyrant and a cruel revolutionary, but now she did not think so clearly. The only thing that excited her a little, that she could not like it. The husband suddenly touched her cheek. Kovan admitted that he really liked the girl, and he did not spare a drop that he married her. Now and henceforth, he promised that he would always need only her, that she would be his only chosen one, forever. The fair-haired man could not believe her happiness, because Kvanah also liked it madly. Although her heart fluttered when the man said that he needed her, the girl understood that it was impossible to forget. He probably liked her, but the keeper, bearing her name, he needed only her strength. With these gloomy thoughts, the empress fell asleep, but the morning took all the anxieties with her, and she happily woke up. Very soon after the wake of the Yusfir, Marianne came to her and asked her first night in the palace past. Blonde said pretty that fragrant herbs helped her fall asleep, and now she felt very kind. Marianne was glad of this, and bowing, asked if the empress had any more wishes. Although the maid was very polite and teaching, the fair-haired felt as if the maid was afraid of her. And let the anxiety did not give the empress the rest. She decided that it was a waste of time to fall into despondency and to be sad. The girl asked her to be given some quick breakfast because she wanted to go somewhere. Mariana asked her where she gathered, and the blonde replied that she was in the imperial library. Hastily having breakfast, the Yusfer soon ended up in the desired place. The library delighted with its size. The enthusiastic Yusfir asked the workers from where they got so many books. They replied that their library is incredibly diverse. In addition to rare copies of books, they presented verses and legends of stray Poles, whose works were only oral. The empress asked if they had something about the history of magicians, and the employee replied that he was, but in a special secret department. But, since the Yusfir was the wife of their emperor, she was allowed to look into the secret section anyway. Having decided to take advantage of her privilege, the girl said that she was going to go there right now. She thought that in this department, it would be able to find the rarest of existing books, and this very inspired and delighted. Perhaps she could even find some key to the secret of the keeper if she was very lucky. Suddenly, the gaze of a fair-haired man caught on one interesting book, which seemed to stand out against the background of everyone else. Her spirit intercepted. She had long dreamed of reading this book and finally found it. Yusfir took the book that interested her from the shelf and comfortably tripled in the reading room, opening it. She thought that the heyday of the era of wizards happened several centuries ago, so she did not expect to find tips. But, contrary to her expectations, she found a book about the history of the genus and the emergence of magic on the northern continent. She heard that they were still actively using magic. The girl opened the book and began to read enthusiastically. Yusfir wanted to hope that the pages say more about the keepers than people were known. Getting deep into reading, she found a fragment that narrated about the case that had happened more than 300 years ago. Then the horror itself invaded the earth, bringing with it ruthless chaos and destruction. The human family and the serene bed of the silver forest, guarded by God, were in danger. And then, having heard the desperate scream of the forest, the representative of the family Katatel came to the call. It was a brave, fair-haired girl who was not afraid to look in the face of danger for the sake of a good goal. The girl, who was called Genesia, entered the battle and vowed to protect the forest until the end of the century. The goddess Fahar was happy and in gratitude endowed the clan Katator with a special gift. But with the flesh of the human, they could not bear the power of God, so the keeper's soul was tied to the silver forest. The book described everything that Yusfir already knew. But one interesting fact was described about Genez Katatel. The forces of the Genesis went beyond human capabilities, and the forest elves blessed her child. These lines were very surprised by the Yusfir, since their history textbooks said that Geneza was an ordinary keeper. She could not understand how the child could be, and why she was called the eternal friend of the forest elves. The empress thought that it would be nice to meet the elves to learn more about Genez, but where to find them? While she read, her husband came to the blonde. He called her from the other end of the hall, and she had to interrupt. Kvanah stood in the doorway and carefully examined his chosen one. He asked why she was still there. The couple agreed to take a walk together, so they left the library together. On the street by that time, it was already dark. Kvanah was worried that she missed dinner and excited everyone that she had never returned to the chambers for the whole day. The girl did not expect her absence could cause so much anxiety both in her husband and maids. The fair-haired guiltily looked at the emperor and apologized. She read and did not notice how time flew. Kvanah touched a little that his wife was so reckless, but her soft gaze was confusing him. Yusfir asked if he was angry with her due to what happened. Realizing that he had the right to express his discontent, the brunette replied that he was not angry and apologized for the fact that his presentations could sound quite rudely. He did not blame the girl at all for her desire to spend more time in the library. He was only pleased with her hobby. It was just that Kavan was worried, because the Empress had not the strongest health, and she did not care at all about herself. In fact, he expected that this would happen at least once, because she liked reading so much. He said that in this case, it was possible for him to pay more attention to this. Kvanah reached forward, closer to his wife's lips, but stopped himself from this action in time, pulling away. The Yusfir was embarrassed and a little bewildered due to such a reaction, not quite understanding whether he was disappointed. Meanwhile, Kvanah brought her to an unknown girl, and opening the door, joyfully invited her to go inside. Before their eyes opened a view of a chic large room with long rows of plants and a fountain in the center. The emperor hoped that at least the desire to see the greenhouse could push it more often to go outside. The girl looked at the plants with interest, gently holding the buds between her fingers. She really liked these flowers. She was delighted with how beautiful it was in the greenhouse and how many different plants were in it. She considered it delightful. To the question of Kvanah, whether she likes, she confidently replied that yes, especially small flowers like those that I have indicated. The emperor admitted that he was very glad that he managed to raise his beloved mood. He asked her to look here, admire the flowers, and not forget to take care of his diet. Kvan ordered the subjects to plant flowers around the new building and hoped that the empress would like here. Yusfir only now realized that the building that was a copy of her house and the greenhouse was built recently. She was to the core, struck by the fact that both Kvan was built specifically for her arrival. No one has ever done such attentive acts in her direction, and then there are also so expensive. She could not understand why Kvan continued to take care of her so much. But suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by something unexpected. From one of the flowers, she felt strange fluctuations in magic. Kavani noticed that the girl was unexpectedly alert and began to peer into the flowers and asked her all in order. The flowers were so beautiful that the empress simply could not look away from them. It seemed to her that since she left Akaya, then magic was completely inaccessible to her. But perhaps she could even talk to the flower. Yusfir carefully held out her hand to the bud, thinking that nothing bad would happen if she still tries. She carefully touched the petals with her finger, the lifetime, the connection with the plant, and suddenly she did it. But, to her great surprise, the flower was alarmed and shouted plaintively, fearing something very much. He asked why Yusfir came here and did not understand why she was sitting next to him and did not run away, although she should. The girl turned around in fright, looking around the room to understand why, according to the plant, she had to escape. Kvan was even more worried about the girl, whose actions became more and more strange. In the green eyes of the empress, chilling horror froze, because the flowers shouted that if she did not leave, he would die. Such an acute plant reaction was associated with the event that occurred in this greenhouse about a week ago. A male voice asked his interlocutor about whether she thought about his offer. The girl said that her answer did not change, and he did not understand why she would be so stubborn. He tried for the sake of all. The interlocutor began to lose her temper more and more. She worked for so long to get her position. The man replied that this was working very well, but was the work more important for her than the younger sister? She clenched her hands into her fists. The girl did not want to risk her work, but her sister was her weak spot. When asked about how he found out about Edith, the man said that this is not important, but it is important to get consent to their deal. He asked the girl to simply report to him everything about what the new empress did and said. The interlocutor worked in the palace. For her, it would not be a problem. Moreover, she came to a meeting to him. This obviously meant that she was interested in the offer of a dark-haired aristocrat. So why was it stubborn? The man believed that they could become closer, but his self, Confidence only angered the girl once again. The participant in the conversation was Marianne, the main maid in the palace, which conducted the empress of the excursion. At the end of the working day, the girl always went to the city to see her younger sister. Every day, she returned home to be able to look after Edith. That was the name of her sister. When Marianne reached the destination and entered the house, the youngest lay on the bed. She did not sleep but was tired. The eldest girl apologized for recently she began to return later. There was a lot of work in the palace. She took out a bottle with lilac translucent liquid from his bosom and reminded that her sister should drink the medicine. Edith listened little into her words, as her fever, and it was very difficult to endure her condition. The man asked if he understands correctly that the sister of Marianne suffered from scoliosis. He did not understand that the girl was not disturbed by the fact that her only sister had to suffer from an incurable disease. Everyone knew that this terrible disease spread very quickly throughout the empire. If the sick person did not have the opportunity to regularly take magic medicines, then at one moment he could stain and die. And given all the circumstances, it was difficult to find a sensible wizard in their world who could make medicine. In addition, the prices grew along with demand, which every day only exacerbated the position of the sisters more and more. It was also difficult due to the fact that magic medicines did not give 100% guarantees and could not even help in the end. He said that if Marianne will cooperate with them, he will receive a lot of money and close all his needs. The only thing the girl clung to was that he said, "us." Did someone stand behind him? The brunette replied that he could talk about this only if Marianne accepts his proposal for cooperation. The girl was at all not understanding what to do. She did not want to lose her sister, but she also becomes a traitor too. After that case, with Yusfer and Kvanah in the greenhouse, one day passed. The emperor was called Aslan. He provided the brunette with the assessment of taxes in the western region and the draft of possible reforms of the tax system. At this pace, they managed to prepare a plan until the next meeting of the parliament. The meeting promised to be tense. Conservative aristocrats were ready to do everything to prevent tax reform. If this happened, then Kvanah was ready to disrupt the bureaucratic exam in which he himself insisted. Aslan noticed that they still adhered to old beliefs and believed that aristocrats should rule people. Kvanah agreed and sarcastically noticed that it was they who did not look and allowed the combat slave to climb the throne. I had to keep in mind that they could betray the emperor at any moment because they had to obey. Kvanah was thinking about whether he should have acted with aristocrats as well as the last ruler. The advisor noticed that the emperor could not do that because his soul was full of mercy. The brunette got up from the desktop to stretch and thoughtfully approached the long window. He did not consider himself merciful. He simply did not want to shed human blood once again. Sooner or later, Yusfer had to find out about the past of Kvanah, and he wondered how his wife would react to this. Would she still say that she likes him, and so confidently call him a hero? The emperor sighed tiredly, straightening his hand with neatly laid dark hair. Meanwhile, the Sphere was in the garden in the morning, and did not leave him all this time at all. Marianne came to her, since the maid was given that the empress wanted to talk to her, and therefore called to herself. A fair-haired woman came off from the flowers loved by her and lifted up, which really wanted to see Mariana. By the impartial tone of the ruler, the maid could not understand what she should have expected from such a serious conversation. But, contrary to her experiences, the empress sincerely smiled at her and said that she would like to ask something. Yusfer in a calm voice invited the maid to walk with her along the greenhouse. It seemed to her that it was simply tiring to stand during the conversation, so they went along the perimeter together. The blonde said that this greenhouse was beautiful, and her breath caught her breath when she first ended up here. And the flowers were amazing for her, because she had never seen such in her homeland before. But also Yusfer was no less surprised at the fact that she was able to talk to the plants of the empire, because her magic was weakened. Kvanah then was also very scared, seeing how his wife turned pale from one glance at the flowers. She tried not to show her anxiety, but did not stop thinking about why. If she did not leave, she would die. Plants told her that the personal maid of Yusfer continued to meet in a greenhouse with strange people. They said that these people were going to cause harm to the empress, and flowers would not want this very much. The girl immediately realized that it was about Marianne, but she could not think that the brown-haired woman was able to betray her. With the permission of the flowers, Yusfir looked at their memories to find out what Marianne told those people about. White flowers assured the fair-haired in the fact that they were completely on her side. All fragments of memory overheard with a kaleidoscope flashed before the eyes of the Yusfir, and she found out about everything. The girl suddenly became very serious and decided that she should immediately deal with the situation. The Empress thought, looking at the flower bed with flowers and trying to figure out how to approach the maid correctly. When Mariana called her, the girl apologized for suddenly silent, looking at the flowers. She asked whether the maid liked the flowers, and she replied that she considers them beautiful. At least she knew that she had no disgust for them. Mariana picked up one scarlet flower. The maid thoughtfully said that just something so beautiful was easy enough to lose. This was insanely scared of her, because thinking about the fragility of flowers, she remembered her sick sister. The brown-haired woman admitted to the Empress that her younger sister loved the flowers much more than herself. Yusfir, pretending that she did not know anything about it, asked her about her sister. Marianne said that Edith is 10 years younger. Their parents died early, so that the responsibility for her upbringing fell on the shoulders of the older sister. The maid admitted that she would like Edith to become a servant and worked with her in the palace, but health did not allow. It was difficult for her to talk about it, but she admitted the Usfir that her sister had suffered from scoliosis for a long time. Mariana said that she tried to get the medicine in her sister in every way, but suddenly came to her senses. The maid said that it was not important and apologized for starting to talk with the Empress about this. But Yusfir reassured her and said that she called to Marianne in order to talk about this first. If you think about it, they saw each other every day. But the fair-haired person did not know anything about her and wanted to fix it. In the future, Marianne was supposed to become a very close person for the Empress. Therefore, Yusfir wanted to try to find out the brown-haired woman closer, even if it was already too late. Marianne treated her distant only because in her eyes she was a stranger who suddenly became her mistress. Although she was cold with the Empress, if she immediately tried to get closer to the maid, this would not have happened. She still did not get rid of the habit of moving away from people instead of trying to recognize them. But she had to improve, because now she is the Empress, and she was responsible for millions of people. The Empress promised that she would help Marianne find medicines, but she did not understand why it was the Yusfir. The girl did not understand what the maid was talking about. She was her man, which means she was important to her. From now on, Yusfir was no longer going to run away. She had to correct the mistakes that she made in a past life. The words of the Empress struck the maid to the core, and she was very moved by this reaction. Yusfir was going to do everything in her power to help Marianne in her situation. When, after a while, she came to tell about her decision, Kvanah, he was incredibly surprised by her appearance. She said that the last time the emperor went a long way to find her, and now was her turn. Since Kvanah at that moment was in the office with Aslan, the girl tactfully asked if they would hurt them. The advisor already wanted to explain to her that they had business, but Kvanah abruptly interrupted him, saying that he was not busy. The man said that they had finished with Aslan, although it was not so, which the Empress was very happy. The blonde asked if His Majesty wanted to share a meal with her and stir up. He was very happy and excited by the unexpected suggestion of the Empress. He really wanted to. They went to the dining room. Yusfir admitted that she was ready, that Kvanah would refuse an unexpected offer. He said that it was not worth worrying, because he was only glad, and she successfully picked up time for a meal. He was also endlessly glad that Yusfir personally invited him to join her and draw up a company. The girl hesitated something uncertainly about the boss of the cook, herself not understanding why she blushed so suddenly. Today, the cook, it seems, had to try even more, since this evening the imperial couple ate together. Kvanah, with surprise, asked the cook had to work even more. Was the table set not as usual? She suddenly came to her senses and did not answer him anything, strongly worried. The girl almost blabbed her husband that she ate these days in the library and almost did not leave there. Kvanah was worried about whether the Empress was sure that everything was fine with her, but did not wait for an answer. He said that they were lucky to meet, but so he would not know that something happened to her if she did not tell. Yusfir thought and did not understand how she could, without preparation, to dump information about Sceliosa and the secret of the forest on Quinnock. Kvanah unexpectedly said that from now on they would have a meal together, despite employment. He cut off her piece of cheesecake, which was for dessert, and offered to try, as she liked raspberries. The girls took a plate with a piece of the cake from him, and the emperor again asked her if nothing happened. He noticed that she talked about how much he was busy, but nevertheless, for some reason, asked to devote time to her. The man understood that she wanted to tell him something important. Yusfir admitted that her maid told her something. The story took some time, and the girl completely plunged her husband to the essence of the maid's problems. Kvanov said that he was familiar with Mariana, and she for a long time passed an internship in the educational institution for the servant. Thanks to her outstanding skills and good manners, Marianne received the main janitor in his palace. But the girl regularly left the castle. He knew that there was a reason for that, but did not think that everything was so serious. Kvanam suggested that because of this whole situation with Squelius, the girl could not concentrate on work at all. Yusfir asked if they could transport Marianne's sister to her. For everyone, this decision would benefit. Kovan suggested that Edith instead in the Imperial Hospital. Simon just planned to study Squelius. The best doctors of the Empire were going to engage in detection, and Marianne would not have to worry. The girl was just delighted with this proposal, so much so that Yusfir could not even believe it. Kavan grinned and said that he was only an empress to wish for something, and the Empire would do everything to please her. Yusfir was incredibly surprised by such words of the emperor and did not believe her happiness. The girl was so confused that Kavan was even worried about whether everything was in order and whether he said something wrong. The empress only thanked him and said that she was afraid to imagine what would happen to Mariana, if not for him. Kvanov modestly replied that he only followed the advice of a fair-haired one. He carefully touched the back of her palm with his finger, gently running him on pale skin. The emperor smilingly remarked that because everything turned out so well, she should thank herself only. She shyly replied that his consent and support helped, so she thought that they were both worthy of gratitude. He affectionately smiled at his wife and still agreed that the girl was completely right. She removed her hand and began to cheerfully chew the cheesecake, trying to cope with her awkwardness approaching her. She tried to keep herself in her hands, but still thought that it was necessary to eat and leave as soon as possible. Suddenly, Kavanov interrupted her and said that she had something left on her face while she was eating. The girl tried to remove it. Since the spouse did not quite understand where she was getting dirty, the man moved closer to her to help a little. He carefully wiped a piece of the cake from the corner of her lips, indicating what he just talked about. The guy removed the baby from his face and wiped his hand on a napkin. Yusfir did not understand her husband incomprehensibly, not having time to understand what had just happened, because he approached so quickly. The man's actions greatly embarrassed her, and she uncertainly thanked that for help, unable to take her eyes off him. Kavan was standing next to his wife's chair, mating a little to her, and also continued to look at her deep emerald eyes. He, in such a short time, became almost his own. On the back of the girl, goosebumps ran. The man called her by name and uncertainly began, wanting her something, but did not have time to finish the phrase. They were interrupted. Aslan unexpectedly burst into the room, who was just looking for His Majesty for an important business. A guy with green hair said that they urgently need to check one document together. Noticing the slight irritation of the ruler and the embarrassment of the Empress's face, Aslan was worried if he had come to them. Kavan, pulling himself together, said that this is not so important and asked what was there at the expense of that important document. Yusfir's thoughts were busy with the fact that if it did not seem to her, the husband just wanted to kiss her when he leaned. The emperor restrained himself with the chosen one and said that he was very glad to see her at dinner. The girl also answered him goodbye, agreeing that soon they would see herself again. Aslan and Evan retired, and Yusfir tried for herself to understand how she should react to signs of attention from Quinnock. Recently, next to her husband, she had strange, not familiar to her earlier feelings. After some time, Yusfir, as always recently, sat in the secret section of the library. Marianne came to her. The Empress was glad to tell the maid wonderful news that her sister would soon be accepted in the Imperial Hospital. She had already talked about this with the Emperor. Soon for her sisters had to prepare a place and bring to the palace. The maid noted that only the sons and members of the ruling dynasty had the right to be patients with the imperial hospital. Mariana thought that she and her sister were not worthy of such an honor, since they were ordinary commoners. She was only lucky to get this work by the mercy of the emperor, but no more. She did not deserve such an attitude. If they were in another country, she would not dare to raise her eyes even on the hem of the empress's dress. Yusfir assured the girl that in the empire of Rodon, people were judged by their skills, and not by order, so she could be calm. She knew that all this time, the brown-haired woman coped with her work better than anyone else. So I deserve everything. Could the Yusfir become a good empress if she does not take care of those who are dear to her and adheres to principles? She did not want to neglect her main maid, so she hoped that the girl would accept her help. Marianne, either bashfully or embarrassedly, drilled the floor of the library with her golden eyes. She could not restrain her tears, as the thought that she was a traitor was hit in her head. She fell to her knees and repented, due to the fact that she lied to such a wonderful person for a long time. The maid admitted that one person secretly contacted her. For the first time, before the arrival of the empress in the palace, he said that he could get the medicine and provide her and sister if she informed him about the empress. Marianne admitted that she deserved a cruel punishment, but the empress understood why the maid did so. The Yusfir, on the contrary, admired the fact that Mariana did not agree to the deal immediately, but only became a victim of manipulation. The girl asked the brown-haired woman to calm down and asked if she could say who made her such an offer. Marianne admitted that the person who contacted her was a famous civil servant in the empire. This mysterious aristocrat was called Baron Edwin, and he clearly had not the best intentions. The empress said that she first hears this name, so she tried to understand why Baron needed information about her. The maid was not sure, but warned that Baron Edwin was a very slippery and cunning man. Once he showed a strong disrespect for the former emperor, and since then lived underground, fearing retribution. It turned out that the Baron did not agree with the idea of the new emperor. He joined him for his own security. Therefore, Baron Baynar, who made the greatest contribution to the promotion of the revolution, refused to assign him any title, and other aristocrats participating in the revolution, including Baron Edwin, did not rely on the other aristocrats. Kvanah granted him an estate as a reward, but soon, due to Edmund's fault, everything fell into decay. Now he is an official of a low rank. The revolution was in order to eliminate the sense of binding of the ruling class, so the aristocrats were indignant. Nevertheless, Yusfir did not understand why Edwin to follow her. She did not have power in the political arena. Mariana asked her to be careful, and said that the Baron talked about the fact that more than one person was involved in this. Yusfir asked the maid where the estate was located, which Edwin received as a reward, and she indicated the approximate position. It was somewhere near the territory of the other people, and above on the map was the region controlled by Ahai. This fact was surprised by the empress, and some anxious fears against this background are accumulated into her head. She was very bothered by the fact that the Baron, who turned out to be a traitor, lived next to Akaya. Her older brother could be involved in this. Remembering the pendant for communication with her brother and cunning plans, she suspected that he could cooperate with Edwin. She scolded herself for not immediately understanding the connection. Only one person wanted to control her every step. Brother still did not trust her and followed other people even now when she left Ahea. The maid was puzzled by how quickly the mood of the empress was deteriorated. She was very darkened and thought, Recaller, the Yusfir fumigated the maid for the information, trying to calm the trembling in her own body. Mariana said that if a girl gives her permission, she would like to contact the Baron again. Yusfir did not quite understand what the brown-haired woman was cloning. The girl tried to explain her decision to her. The brown-haired woman said that if they accuse him, then real traitors will hide, and they will not be able to find out who stood behind this. The Yusfir was dangerous to speak out against the ill-wishers itself. It should be acted more carefully. That is why Marianne wanted to play the role of a double agent, pretending to accept Baron Edwin's proposal. The maid wanted to gain his trust and learn more about the conspiracy that was preparing against the Empress. The blonde was Opes, pulled by the fact that if she agrees, her subordinate could suffer at the hands of the Baron and his allies. The brown-haired woman convinced her that since Yusfir saved her sister, It would be an honor for her to devote her life to serving her. Therefore, Marianne knelt down and, taking the Empress's palms into her own hands, desperately asked to allow her to help. She wanted the Empress to give her a chance and, although not completely confidently, agreed to this proposal. The blonde thanked the maid for devotion and courage that she showed. The day passed quite calmly, and, when the dark time came, the young Empress went down into the castle's courtyard. She stopped in front of the entrance to the very new-built building around which Kvanah planted flowers for her. The girl squatted down in front of the flower beds and carefully examined the plants, pondering everything that happened in a day. From behind her, he called Kvanah, who also went down to the courtyard, secretly following his wife. He asked the chosen one what she thought so concentratedly about, and the Usfir said that wherever she went, beautiful flowers everywhere. She pointed her finger at a certain flower, saying that this species is difficult to force to bloom. The gardener tried perfectly. Now, when the Empress mentioned this, already Kvanah thought about what it was so. The girl translated the topic and said that she had already ordered Marianne to bring her sister to the palace. She also said that the maid was very happy, that now they would care about the baby. Mariana squeezed her hand so tightly that Yusfer felt how the maid perked up and gained a new meaning in life. But for some reason, at that moment, the Empress became, and very scary. The alarm originated in her chest. Then she suddenly realized that Marianne became completely her man and felt a huge responsibility for the girl. When Marianne cried, holding her hands, the Empress thought about whether she deserved such confidence from the maid. Yusfir suddenly fell silent and apologized to Kvanah because she had so many thoughts. It was not worth loading it. The Emperor, contrary to the fears of the Yusfir, was obviously not at all against listening to all her thoughts. He said that every day he walked along this road to the office, but he had never noticed what beautiful flowers here. Kvanah suggested that if it were not for her attentiveness, then he would never have found out how it was not easy for their gardener. In the case of Marianne, everything is exactly the same. He was somewhat alerted to her, but he did not even think to find out what was happening. He noticed that noticing such things and taking care of others was not at all easy, so he praised his wife. The Emperor was glad that every day his wife was remarkable and how sensitive, good man. He believed that Yusfir was able to bear responsibility for their people and completely trusted her in this matter. Kvanah carefully smiled at her and thanked that he had it and agreed to marry him. The girl's heart trembled from such words, because she was no less happy for the fact that she ended up in the Empire of Rayan. Kvanah took her hand, and with all his love and respect the brush of the chosen one, putting all his feelings into this gesture. Each time the Emperor told Yusfir something so pleasant, she remembered what secret she hid from him. The blonde really liked this man very much, so she was afraid to disappoint her husband in the future. She could not imagine how in the future Kvanah would react to the secret of the keepers, and her brother, and her brother. She knew that she could never become a real empress, but so far she was silent about it. Nevertheless, even if this is not real, she wanted to try to benefit the Radon Empire while she was here. In order to have the right to take responsibility for others, she had to work as hard as possible. And at the same time, she had to maintain a subtle balance between Ahi's devotion, agreement with her brother, and Radon. Not so long ago, the brother tried to contact her by the magical amulet, which he handed over to her before leaving. He desperately called her through the artifact, trying to draw attention to himself, but could not know that Yusfir had heard him perfectly. A little later, she found the strength to answer, and told her brother that she was very glad to hear him, although this is not so. He said that there was no news from her, so he was worried, thinking that she had died. But this was not so. The king understood that. The sister was still trying to please Kvanah. She apologized that she made her brother worry. He asked how Yusfir felt in the empire, and she said that everything was not as bad as she thought before. To herself, the empress thought that, although Marianne became her double agent, not only she should get information, Yusfir told her brother that the emperor was very suspicious. She could not move freely. She lied to please. The king of Ahe had other information and said that, as far as he knows, they cared about her well. Pretending that this is not so, Yusfir told her brother that she did not understand what he was talking about. The guy replied that he had taken care of everything, introducing a loyal person into the upper layers of society in order to look after her. Yusfir already knew about this, but did not tell him. As expected, her brother most likely stood behind Baron Edwin. She tried to find out from the king who this person is, because in this case, it would be easier for her to act. The guy refused to speak. He wanted his sister to not ask unnecessary questions and simply act on his instructions. If the girl began to intervene in politics for no good reason, then this would only cause them problems, as he thought. Although if Yusfir really wanted to help him in the implementation of his plan, then she had one opportunity to do it. The king said that in the empire, everyone talked about the recent project of the tax system reform. Despite the fact that the reform plan was quite radical, Kvanah did not encounter condemnation and discontent. Even the conservative aristocracy did not show a negative attitude to the innovations of the emperor. The brother wanted the Yusfir to know from the spouse how he managed to achieve this and avoid possible scandals. Since they were going to destroy the empire, there was no need to contribute discord between the emperor and the conservatives. The Yusfir set an alarm that the aristocrats also contributed to the revolution, and if they intervened, Ahea could suffer. The king of Ahea mysteriously and ambiguously said that his sister was in a hurry with her conclusions. He said irritably that since the Yusfir to worry about his native kingdom, then she should look for the weaknesses of Kvanah. If she hadn't done this, then I would have to make the girl whisper the emperor he needed in bed. He restrainedly ended his speech with the words that he hopes that her heart still hurt for the fate of their country. Then, making his voice softer and pulling himself together, the blonde asked his sister to contact him more often and report everything. But cutting off the connection with the Yusfir, the guy became furious. He was infuriated that the girl pretended to know something. Clutching an amulet in his hand, he recalled the blonde's words that she was worried about Ahea and how cute she turned to him. He was convinced that all this deliberate concern and obedience of Yusfir, complete nonsense and nonsense. In his opinion, she simply did not want to lose universal love and could only regret herself, pretending to be a heroine. It was in order to remain a savior in the eyes of her people, she agreed to this humiliating marriage. He desperately shouted into the void that if Yusfir was worried about his kingdom, he was obliged to fight to the end. The guy was obsessed with a terrible thought, believing that everyone was only thinking about how to destroy Ahea as soon as possible. Yusfir did not know anything at all about what her brother went to protect her native country from enemies.